What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so this is like one of the best stories ever. Batman gets a bachelor party, and I love this. I love this thing so much. Okay, for those of you guys who don't know, Batman marrying Catwoman is like the biggest moment in the history of the Batman mythos, right? Like DC's been dancing around this forever and ever and ever and ever, right? It's always been like, you know, it's like the Jim and Pam situation. Will they, won't they? That kind of a thing. Ultimately, we know it's gonna go in that direction. Now, if I'm a betting man, all right, I will bet all the money in my pockets to all the money in your pockets, that marriage ain't gonna work out. Something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. And Batman, I don't know why I'm laughing about this. Batman's misery is hilarious. So something's gonna happen. And like Batman's gonna have to make a choice. Bruce is gonna have to make a choice between staying married or being Batman. And he's gonna choose to be Batman. Either that or Catwoman's gonna die. But like something's gonna happen. I mean, you know it is. Batman can't be happy. You guys know it's true. Like you guys know. But this is amazing. So anyway, initially this picks up with Superman and Nightwing. It's kind of funny because they end up going to a place called Batburger, which I imagine has like the most amazing food. But like everybody's dressed as superheroes. Let me tell you something, man. I would go to a restaurant that was like superhero themed. Like, dude, I would crush that place. I'd make a great big huge thing out of it. Like I'd live stream it, like I'd Periscope it, or I would make a vlog out of it. Like me and Comicstorian and Salad Comic Pop, like we would all like get together. We would fly out to that city and go to that place and be like, hey everybody, we're doing a fan meetup at like whatever this restaurant is. It's like superhero themed and all the employees are dressed as superheroes. You got Condiment Man back there, which I think it is actually the real Condiment Man. Those of you guys who don't know who Condiment Man is, he's like the greatest character ever. He just like runs up on folks with like ketchup and mustard and just starts spraying them down. It's amazing. It's pretty awesome. But this is also really touching too, because when you watch how Batman interacts, it's kind of funny because this whole idea of him basically marrying Catwoman is like Batman finally finding love, right? It's like the one thing Batman can't have. He can have anything in the world that he wants because of all the money he has, but he can't buy love. And so because of that, Batman's always just kind of in this situation where he's always brooding and miserable all the time, probably because he's never getting laid. And then in response to this, you have like Batman and Nightwing who show up and they're like, hey man, we're here to whisk you off to your bachelor party. And Batman's not brooding. He's smiling. Like he's excited about it. He's like, yeah man, a bachelor party. A bachelor party. a bachelor party. So anyway, the cool thing about this is that it's what you would expect with a superhero themed bachelor party, right? Like, I mean, they kind of make a joke about getting Batman strippers, which I would say it'd be kind of cool. I heard someone is having a special day, you know, and like some chick comes in, you know, and like just starts dancing all over Batman. She's like, let's remove that itchy mask. And he's like, get out of here. You know, just starts screaming at her like Batman would so do that, you know. But anyway, what Superman does is he actually gives Batman like this kind of lightning door, which allows him to access different dimensions. And this is so genius and it's so cool because instead of saying like, hey Batman, I want to take you to an alternate universe called Flashpoint where your dad is Batman. Instead of doing that, it's like, hey, we're just gonna go fishing in this place. Like we're just gonna go to like this pocket dimension. It's an infinite supply of fish. Who knows where they come from? And we're just gonna go fishing. The problem with this is that in the middle of it all, they're met by the arrival of Hush. Now, Tommy's a character that we've never really talked about. Hush has always been one of the coolest characters in DC Comics when it comes to Batman. And the reason why is because it was written by Jeff Loeb and drawn by Jim Lee. It came out in 2003, but Hush was like this great big storyline that served one purpose to kind of add a little bit of mythos in terms of how Batman became Batman. But then there's other things in terms of like his back life, right? Like if you go and read Batman Year One by Frank Miller from, you know, post-crisis 1988 or 1987 or whatever it was that it came out, you get this whole idea that Bruce Wayne's parents died, and then he just kind of ran headlong into like studying all these forms of, you know, knowledge and experience and gaining martial arts and you know, becoming a weapons master and all that kind of good stuff. And it's cool for the purpose that it serves. But at the same time, what Hush did is it actually introduced Tommy, and it said that Tommy was this kid that Bruce Wayne played with when he was younger, and it was Thomas Elliot who basically taught him things like you have to think from your enemy's perspective. You don't play the game, you play the person. And so that's the whole thing that Thomas Elliot, you know, that Tommy was really kind of coming from. The idea was that Tommy wanted the life of Bruce Wayne, quote unquote, in the sense that Tommy came from a wealthy family. His father was extremely abusive and really abused his mom, but the idea was to take them both out so that Tommy would inherit basically his entire family's fortune. The result was that where he essentially sabotages his parents' car and his mom survived, Bruce Wayne's parents died. And so following that, Tommy always kind of had this irrational hatred for Bruce in the sense that it was like Bruce took the life of Tommy. Now, this whole thing is kind of interesting because it like Hush is probably one of the most notable villains. Now, he's not nearly as popular as the Joker. ever, right? It's never really been that way. But he always wears bandages over his face. He has his skill in, in plastic surgery, different things like that. But for certain circles, for people who are more experienced with Batman, there's a lot of people out there who will say Hush is the most interesting villain he has. But what you end up having is Nightwing, who immediately leaps into action. And the reason why is because Batman, of course, saves Nightwing's life, but it's a way to just kind of throw the story in that direction. And this is kind of cool because you don't really see Dick Grayson fighting against Hush. You don't really see that often. Hush is a Batman villain, but still, like, in response to all this, like, Nightwing and Tommy actually end up flying through the lightning portal, more or less, and the result is that they're kind of thrown into this other dimension. But they actually kind of end up in this place in the in-between, which is kind of between existence and non-existence, which is really kind of weird because they're met with a guy, and it's interesting because DC kind of plays on this idea that he could be a couple different people. Some will say he's like the Phantom Stranger, or some might say that he's like the Question, or something like that, where you never see his face. You're never really given an answer to the identity of this person. Now, it may be this is just designed to be that way. It's just a one-off and you never really know who they are. Or it could be that later on down the line, they play a bigger role. Honestly, I'd say it's probably the former, but we're basically told this is the place where like the echoes of men go, more or less, when they've effectively given up on life. That some people are yanked there, that some people are pulled there against their own volition. But no matter what it is that goes on, the people who occupy this place are people who basically don't have an identity. It's people who don't really know who they are. They've lost all sense of self. And so anyone who stumbles into their path basically is taken by these individuals. What it requires is for Tommy and Nightwing to fight side by side. And this is done for a reason. One of the things that's very easy to lose track of when it comes to Tommy is that he's a very capable fighter. He's very much a thinking man's villain. And so when you have someone like Nightwing, it's really the Half-Life effect, right? Like you can only ever create something that's half what you are. When it comes to Bruce Wayne, taking taking Dick Grayson under his wing and then teaching him to become Nightwing or become Robin and then eventually Nightwing, Dick Grayson will never be Bruce Wayne. He'll only ever be half of what Bruce Wayne is. He'll only ever be half the man because that's the way things play out. But with Dick Grayson and Tommy working alongside each other, it's actually pretty cool to see. And with them facing off against these guys, they're basically told by the Faceless Man, you can't defeat them in the conventional sense. These guys, I mean, this place is possessed by the spirits of, countless people. So it's essentially a war of attrition. Eventually, there'll just be so many that come at you, it'll wear you down and you won't be able to fight anymore. And so in response to this, basically this Faceless Man says, in order to defeat these guys, you have to travel to a place that's conducive to your experience. That'll give you basically a reason to keep on going. And so what we end up having is the two of them traveling to this kind of in-between version of Wayne Manor. And this is cool because when they get there, Tommy kind of asks the question, why are we here? And Dick Grayson's response is, well, because I know who I am, but you need to basically rediscover who you are. You're a friend of Bruce Wayne. This is your life and times, more or less. You're a friend of Bruce and essentially runs over all the things that we talked about earlier. But for Nightwing, one thing to also bear in mind here is there is a little bit of unassuredness there. I mean, he just kind of have to reassure himself of who he is. Because while Dick Grayson is Nightwing, while he does have Bloodhaven, he is his own superhero, it's one of those things where, like any normal human being, he suffers from an existential crisis. And that's kind of the question that gets asked. Like, what am I really doing here? Like, what's the basis behind all this? And that's the nature of where he's at right now. It's kind of making sure that he really knows what he's fighting for and what things mean to him, why they're relevant. And so Hush kind of starts laughing, Tommy starts laughing a little bit, and we end up finding out that he had used his surgical skills to turn himself into Dick Grayson. And so it's kind of like, man, because now he's pursuing the life of Dick Grayson, so to speak, because in his mind, it's no longer a matter of, I want to be Bruce Wayne. It's a matter of, why did Bruce take you over me? Like, why did he choose you instead of me? And so when these people start descending on them, when these kind of, ghostly folks start descending on them, basically the door opens up again, Batman saves Dick Grayson, Dick tries to save Tommy, and it doesn't work. So Tommy's basically left behind, presumably to become one of the mindless ones. Now, this can go a couple different directions. In reality, as cool as Tommy is, as cool as Hush is, he's very much a holdover from before New 52. DC tried to kind of bring him back in Batman Eternal, and it worked for what it was, but he's one of those sort of satellite characters where you don't see him nearly as much as you see Joker or Penguin or Riddler or anything like that, just because of the fact that the stories he pops up in are usually significant. I think that Tommy's a character that DC kind of seems to be getting rid of. That kind of seems to be the direction that they're going in, because really with this whole thing of Batman marrying Catwoman sort of segues into what's supposed to be this post-Doomsday Clock landscape where the entire DC roster is kind of reshuffled, shaken up, and it's kind of Rebirth 2.0 in the sense that Rebirth sort of stops becoming the branding initiative and we move into the next phase, quote unquote. And so with that in mind, it may just be there's really no room for Hush, or he'll show up somewhere along the line. He's very much like Bane in that capacity. But following this, where Superman basically takes his leave, it's really just Batman and Dick Grayson who are left there. And this is awesome the way this is done, because if you go and read Detective Comics, or you go and read the Batman comics or Nightwing comics, they never really cross over. And that was a big thing that happened in the beginning of Rebirth. It was one of the big criticisms people had was that, why doesn't Batman just call a person in? And if he doesn't, then what were they doing doing at the time. And so that's why if you go and you pick up the DC Rebirth line of comics, you can literally read them all in chronological order. So you see what Superman was doing between this story and that story, and it fits in perfect. The way that it's done, the way it all lines up. And so because of all that, you know, Dick Grayson's been in Bloodhaven, dealing with everything that's been going on, you know, dealing with his girlfriend and everything that goes on in his own city. And so it's kind of cool because for a lot of fans who are, really a lot of people who are big fans of Batman, one of the things that they really seem to miss, at least at the various forum posts to be believed, is they miss the kind of father-son relationship between Dick Grayson and Batman. Now, this was the most logical direction of things, right? Like Dick Grayson couldn't stay a kid forever. And so because he couldn't stay a kid forever, he'd eventually have to grow up and step out into his own. But it's like every father and son in the real world, despite the fact that that son will go off, he'll find a girl, he'll eventually start a family of his own, he'll always return home. But you don't really see that with Dick Grayson and Batman. And so it's really Dick kind of sitting down, you know, in terms of how the story's written and saying, I recognize I haven't kept contact the way that I should. Unless you call us together for some great big huge crisis, I'm nowhere to be found. And that needs to change. I want to play more of a role in your life, and I want to be able to be there outside of just showing up for various superhero escapades or some massive crisis. I don't want to put distance between us. And so again, it's cool because it's kind of rekindling this father-son relationship between Bruce and Dick Grayson, and presumably we're going to see more involvement between the two as we go forward into the future of DC Comics. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.